I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings, son.
There's always a pecking order. The little packers never mess with the big packers. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
All right, Jared. Well, let's move ahead. We'll go to 50 years in the past now. We'll go to 1973, so 10 years after 1963, and let's talk about the Mr. America first. So this was the 35th Mr. America, and Jim Morris was the winner.
Jim Morris, yeah.
Yeah.
I also knew very well. Jim was actually was a firefighter in New York. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jim was a firefighter in New York, and there's a funny story I can tell you about Jim Morris. Me and my training partner, this had to be the '60s or mid '60s. My friend had an uncle who lived in northern New Jersey, and they had two counties they called Passaic Bergen counties, right? And they were holding a contest called the senior, the Mr. Passaic Bergen and teenage Mr. Passaic Bergen, but it was an AAU contest, and to enter these shows you had to live in one of those two counties.
Okay.
Well, what my friend did is he used his uncle's address. Sent in the application. I sent an application using the uncle's address. We both competed in the Passaic Bergen contest. He won the senior. I won the teenage. Now, a couple of weeks later, my friend goes to compete in a show somewhere else, which I don't remember where. Well, it might have been Philadelphia. And Jim Morris was hanging out with a guy named Rudy Sableau.
Yeah.
Rudy Sableau ran both the AAU weightlifting and the bodybuilding in New York.
Okay.
He was Bob Hoffman's man in New York, you could say.
Okay.
He first brought, apparently, somehow, I don't know how, he found out that we both snuck into the New Jersey contest. So first he brought my friend in, and they brought him into a room, and they're kind of interrogating him. And I wasn't even competing that night. I was in street clothes. They called me into the room, and in the room was Rudy Sableau and Jim Morris, who was kind of Rudy Sableau's assistant, if you can believe this. This is in New York.
What year was this, Jerry?
So this had to be 66, maybe. 66.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Rudy Sableau started interrogating. He says, did you compete in a teenage Passaic Bergen contest? I said, yes. He says, did you win the contest? I said, yes. He says, are you aware that contest was restricted to residents of Passaic Bergen counties? I blatantly lied and said, no, I was not. He said, it was. He says, you and your training partner or the other guy, you snuck into the contest. We'd like you to return the trophy.
Oh, my God.
And also, you are suspended from competition for 6 months. Now, the thing that's interesting was it was a completely dark room. This is just like the movies with one bare light bulb hanging above me. I'm sitting in a stool.
Like the detectives.
Exactly, just like the detective. And Rudy Sableau's on one side and Jim Morris is on the other. And as Rudy Sableau is talking to me, I already knew Jim Morris. I look at Jim Morris and he's glaring at me. I mean, he's glaring at me like he wants to tear my eyes out. I'm thinking to myself, why is he so mad? What's the big deal?
Right.
You know what? I snuck into a contest. I mean, come on, I'll never forget that. I brought it up with him later.
That's hilarious.
We had a good laugh over it, but I mean, no, he was a great guy. I got to know him very well, over the years. And, he became a vegan, Jim.
Oh, did he? Okay.
He became the vegan. And at one of the, at the Muscle Beach shows, as you know, they hold this breakfast,
Yeah.
And, I used to sit with Jim at the breakfast, and we were talking one time. This is when he was much older. He was in his 60s, maybe 70s, I think he was. And I said, because he had been a vegan for a couple of years, and I said, Jim, honestly, I mean, how do you feel as a vegan? Because we hear that you guys can't build any muscle and you're low on energy. And he looked at me. He says, "I feel better than I've ever felt in my life." He says, I'm keeping all my muscle. He says, I wouldn't even think of going back to not being a vegan. We spoke, and the story I heard was that Jim was going to be evicted from this place he lived in out here, and he was suffering also from depression.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about his dog. I don't remember the thing about the dog, but he committed suicide. Also.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Very sad. Great guy, Jim Morris. Very nice guy.
Bill Pearl trained him, right?
Yeah, Bill Pearl trained him. And I used to, when I lived next door to Frank Zane in 1970, Jim Morris would come by to meet with Frank Zane.
Mm.
Frank Zane would give him tips about training and posing. He'd actually come over to Frank Zane's apartment.
Mm. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they were interrogating you in the detective room in 1966, you already knew of him, so he was already winning titles, I guess, huh?
Yeah, he was winning titles, and I was just shocked. I just happened to glance, and he gave me this. He had to look like you would give somebody who killed your family.
It's so funny how strict they were back then,
I was a teenager. I'm 16 years old. I'm looking. I'm thinking, what are you so mad? Why are you so mad at me?
Right.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
And Rudy Sablow, he looked like he wanted to. If there was a baseball bat in the room, he would have broke my kneecaps. The way they
winning a teenage contest that nobody ever heard of.
That had 5 guys in there. And you would think that I had committed capital murder.
Right.
The way they were so angry at me with the dark room and the one light. This is like right out of a movie, But that's the way it was back then.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. But Jim and I reminded him of that story later on. We had a good laugh.
Oh, really? That's great.
And hey, Jim, were you really as mad at me as you look? He said, I don't remember. I might have been.
Yeah. So I guess that contest took place in Virginia. There was 32 competitors. And they said I read in IronMan magazine, there was some controversy because Jim scored 30 points more than any competitor in the contest.
Wow.
They had a weird scoring system back then. It was like points, kind of like what the IFBB was doing. But it was really, I couldn't understand it. I was trying to figure it out, reading the article. I don't know what they based these points on. Probably a lot of it was, some of it was athletic points, some of it was personality, the interview stuff. But anyways, when they announced at the night show that he won, and they said that he was 30 points, he scored 30 points more than the second place finisher, the audience booed.
Wow.
Because they thought it was controversial because they was like, how can this guy, score 30 points? Usually somebody wins by 5 points or 3 points, so 30 points. It was like they thought there was some kind of setup. But he was also the second black bodybuilder to win the America, right? Yeah.
I was just going to ask you. And also, didn't Jim compete in the AAU American at least a year or two before that, before he won?
I think so, yeah. Let me look.
I think he did. I think he placed in the top 5 year or two.
Yeah, I think he did really well. I think he was 4th or something, yeah.
Yeah. That'd be 72 or 7.
Yeah, that would have been 72, right?
And that's when Steve Mahalik won.
Exactly. Yeah, he was 3rd. You're right.
Yeah, I remember.
And he also won the Mr. USA in 72.
Right. I remember him winning the USA too. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you were what year did they interrogate you, Jerry? 66?
6, yeah. It was
in 67 he won the Junior USA. So he was national.
Oh, no, he was competing even that year at 60. He was competing.
Yeah.
But I guess he was just a very ethical guy, and he thought with me and my that was just extremely unethical, I don't see the big deal.
No, it doesn't sound like a big deal.
Listen, John, we could have both lost the contest. You got to look at it from that point of view.
Yeah.
It's just a quirk that we both happen to win.
Happen to win, yeah.
My friend could have, a trading partner could have lost the senior, and I could have lost the team. What can I say,
Yeah.
One of those things.
So Pete Grymkowski was 2nd that year.
Yeah. Pete.
So this was now the 3rd year in a row where he took 2nd place, because he took 2nd to Casey in 71. He took second to Steve Mihalik in 72, and now he took second to Jim Morris in 73. So I think after that he dropped out for a while. He didn't come back until 77 because I think he's like I'm never going to win this thing, you know.
Right. Well, Pete had this. It was really a monstrous physique back
Yeah,
then.
it's huge. Yeah.
Very wide shoulders, gigantic deltoids. Very thick chest. But he was a little on the blocky side.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand why he would get second. That like bridesmaid, never the bride. But
Yeah.
I think it's probably because they felt that Jim Morris and Malik were more aesthetic than him.
Yeah, Mihalik definitely was, right? He had the smaller waist.
Yeah, he had a very good V-shaped, tiny waist.
Yeah.
No, and Jim was very muscular, had a complete body, head to toe body. So
Yeah.
I mean, but Pete could have won it. It depends on what they're looking for,
Right. Yeah, from the pictures he looked massive, but like you said, he didn't. He just he looked a little smooth, and then when he posed, there was like nothing really happened,
See, that's the thing with Pete. That's the thing with Pete. I mean, he always never looked really ripped.
Right.
Also, and Arnold said to me, I'm just remembering a conversation I had with Arnold. Arnold said that if they judged a contest on a standing relaxed, and he said the same thing about Serge Nubret,
Mm-hmm.
he said Grymkowski would beat everybody.
Yeah.
He says as soon as he posed, then he gets 10th place.
Yeah.
Arnold's being a little hard on it, but I mean, but Pete in a double arm, his arms did not meet expectations.
Mm-hmm.
He did you see the guy so massive, standing relaxed.
Yeah.
When he does a double arm to see these gigantic, but they were kind of mediocre, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's you've added all up. There's your second place. That's why you got,
kind of like Paul Dillette too, years later.
Yeah, Paul was another guy like that.
Unbelievable standing relaxed, but just, he looked great posing too, but definitely like standing relaxed, he looked better than everybody.
Yeah, standing relaxed. Even to this day, Paul was so damn big. I knew Paul very well.
Yeah.
He was so freaking huge that even with the monsters you see today, he would still be bigger than them.
Yeah, I know.
The only guy who might rival Paul, in my opinion, was Ronnie Coleman. Was the only guy who could stand next to Paul and not look small. That's it.
Yeah.
The only guy.
Because he was so wide and so tall.
He was 6'2". He was a big guy. I mean, I remember, helping him out right before a show. And I remember he was like putting the stuff on his skin or whatever it was. And he just happened to flex his arm right in front of me. And it was just, I can't even, it was the biggest arm I've ever seen previous to that was Arnold.
Yeah.
Paul's arm made Arnold look like it was like a baby. Seriously. That's how you got to see this guy in person to truly appreciate how thick and big he was. He was an absolute monster. He really was.
Yeah. What was interesting too was Jim Morris was 38 that year when he won. So that was pretty old for a bodybuilder back then, right?
He was one of the oldest. That's true. Yeah. That's true.
Anibal Lopez was third. Remember him?
Anibal, sure. Anibal, I met him. I saw him in the magazines for years. I finally met him he came out for one of the muscle. I think it was when Chris Dickerson was inducted into the Hall of Fame at Muscle.
He was good friends with Chris.
Anibal was a very close friends of Chris, and he came out to see Chris get the award. And I spoke to Anibal Lopez for a while, and very nice guy. Also ultra religious, though. Very, very religious guy too.
And always a natural bodybuilder. Never took steroids.
He was one of those very strict natural guys.
He did really well in these AAU national level shows. He was up there, second place, third place,
He won just about every AAU East Coast show. He won them all.
Yeah, being natural.
Very nice, symmetrical physique. Not the biggest guy.
No.
Abs, small waist. Had a great physique.
Yeah, he was always ripped.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to mention one other thing before I forget.
Yeah.
We were talking about guys who died. The most recent guy who died, since we're talking about bodybuilding history, Randy Watson. Do you remember Randy Watson? I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do remember him. Yeah.
Randy Watson was a top bodybuilder in the 60s, just passed away like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, really? No kidding. I didn't hear that.
Yeah, just wanted to mention him. He had all the reason I just remembered him was he had the kind of same physique as Anibal Lopez.
Yeah.
Small, but very symmetrical, nice balance, great abs. He just passed away. Randy Watson was a top
Oh.
body.
Yeah, he was in the Mr. America a few
Yeah,
times. I remember his name.
he did pretty well. He never won, but he was up there. He was up in the top. Yeah.
Another name that was in this America was Danny Padilla, was 15th.
Danny Padilla, 15th. Yeah.
Yeah, that was when he must have just started. I think he was Pete Grymkowski's training partner because they were both from
Right.
Rochester.
They were. That's very
Yeah.
true. They were both training up in Rochester, New York. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
And Jim won the most muscular that year too, over Pete Grymkowski.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the NABBA Universe that year. Let me go to that. So that was won by Chris Dickerson.
Chris.
That was the first time Chris won the NABBA Universe. So Chris had he won the America in 70, and then he went over to the NABBA Universe. He won the short class, and then in 71 he won the short class again, and Ken Waller won the overall.
Okay.
Then I think he figured I need to make improvements to my physique, so he took 72 off, and it was a good move because when he came back in 73, he was dramatically improved, and he won the overall.
Right.
And coming from the short class too, that was a good victory for him.
It was, yeah. Yeah. Who else was in that show with Chris, John?
Shigeru Shigeta was in his class. Remember him? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was he had a great physique.
Great physique.
Tremendous abs, ripped.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was really startlingly muscular. Very
Really
muscular.
thick too.
Yeah, he was very good.
So I think Shigeta won it, I think in 76. I think he finally won the overall in 76. Yeah, 76.
Yeah.
But I didn't know he was in it in 73. He goes back pretty far then.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the guys you will find will compete year after year until they win it,
Yeah, that happened a lot in the NABBA Universe, right? Because a lot of guys from all the different countries would keep coming back year after year.
So guy Harry Johnson, who until recently, he was the oldest Mr. America before Bill Pearl.
Right.
He won the America in 1959, year after Tom Sansone.
Mm-hmm.
But he had actually competed 6 years in a row before he won.
At the NABBA Universe? Or
No,
the
Harry Johnson competed in the AAU America 6 years.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
A lot of guys who would say, maybe after 2-3 years, say, forget it.
Done, yeah.
I'm not going to win.
Yeah.
But he just kept going. It paid off.
Persistence pays off.
Yeah.
Roy Duval won the medium class at the NABBA Universe that year.
Roy Duval, yeah. I always liked Roy Duval. So I always thought he was. I know you interviewed.
Yeah.
He was to me a kind of an underrated guy. He had such a nice physique, just great arms, beautiful arms.
Yeah.
Shape, nice abs. He was to me a really good bodybuilder. Not too many people mention him though. He's like
They kind of forgot about him. Yeah.
It was like a forgotten guy.
He had a great year that year. That was kind of his breakout year in 73. He won Mr. Britain, which was a big title. That was because Mr. Britain title was so old, it was very prestigious to win that.
Yeah.
And then he won Mr. Europe, and he also won the AAU Mr. World. And then he won his class at the Universe.
Wow. Great year for him.
And he probably would have won the overall if Chris wouldn't have been there,
Yeah. Yeah, he was in the 80 Olympia too.
Yeah, he was. He was standing right next to Arnold.
It's like he wasn't even there. They didn't even look at him.
Right. Yeah, he wasn't in his best shape at that one, though, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then Paul Grant won the tall class that year at the Universe.
I got to know Paul when he came over to the United States training at Gold. Very nice guy from Wales. Poor guy died of kidney failure later on.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. He was a very nice guy, Paul. Very muscular.
That was his second year in a row winning that class at the Universe. So he did well at that NABBA Universe.
Yeah. I actually sent for a course that Paul Grant was selling a course.
Oh, really? Way back then?
This was 70s, early 70s, maybe,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, then, and it was something, I can't remember the title of it. Maybe how to build more muscle or be more muscular or something. I looked at the photos of him. I said, this guy's in great shape. In those days, I had this mentality that a lot of young guys did, where if you follow the routine of a guy who looks great, that you'll kind of look like him. They're horrible
Yeah,
mistakes.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of people still make that mistake. Today, it's with these what do they call them? The people on social media, uh,
Influencers.
influences. They
Yeah,
think, oh, if I join, listen to them, and they have, after a while, they got 3 million people following, all with this idea that listening and following advice, these guys, it still persists to this day.
yeah,
But I sent for Paul Grant's. It wasn't a bad course. It was all right, but
yeah.
just I didn't tell him that when I met him. I was a little embarrassed. But no, but he was a very nice guy. He used to come to Golds, not a loud guy, kind of quiet guy. But when you talk to him, he was a nice guy, very nice, good,
He
really
was,
good.
he was in Pumping Iron too, because he
In
was with
Pumping
the
Iron,
Universe
yeah.
that year. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
So in the pro division, Boyer Co won
yeah.
the NABBA Universe. So let's see what year was, because I know Boyer won this a few times, but this was the first time I believe he won the NABBA Universe.
Who did he beat that year?
It was a good lineup. He beat Dennis Tenorino.
Oh, Dennis. Wow.
Well, in his class, he beat Tony Emmett. He beat Elias Petsis. So that was in his class. He was in the short class. And then Dennis won the tall class, and Reg Park got second.
Oh, okay.
So that had to be Reg's last year, right? 1973.
Is that 73? Yeah.
Yeah. Because he competed against Arnold in 70, and then he competed against Bill Pearl and Sergio in 71. Let's see if he
I don't remember
competed.
what year that Reg Park won his last NABBA Universe. I can't remember.
65.
Oh, was it 65?
Yeah.
I remember the amateur one of that. He was a guy named Elmo Santiago.
From New York. Yeah. Yeah.
I knew who I met. I met when I was living in New York.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Very, very nice guy also. I still remember we had a nice conversation. I think he was running a gym, if I remember right, in the Bronx or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Came to the gym where I was working out at the time, Mid-City Gym, and I was talking to him.
He had a good physique.
Great physique. Great
Yeah.
physique. Yeah.
Yeah, so the last year that Reg won the Universe was the same year they started the Olympia in 65.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
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 I think Weider wanted Reg to go in the Olympia that year, but he didn't.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Yeah, so 73 was his last contest that he
Right.
ever did. Yeah. So how old would he have been then? He was born in 28, right?
Yes.
Like
45.
45.
45 is right.
Yeah.
45. I mean, that's up there for a bodybuilding competitor, especially at that level.
Especially back then, right? Because
Yeah.
now bodybuilders look better at an older age, but back then,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be in your 40s, I think was pretty impressive, to be competing at
Yeah.
that level, right?
Yeah. Well, Bill Pearl was something like 41 when he won his
Yeah,
last.
when he won his last one, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, bodybuilding is unusual activity because there's a lot of other, let's say, athletic activity sports where you're basically done in your 20s.
Yeah.
Out by the time you're in your 30s, it's all over. Like swimmers, it's all over.
Basketball players.
Whereas bodybuilders, a lot of them, they have this thing called muscle maturity,
Mhm.
where they seem to get better as they get older. A
Yeah.
lot of them don't peak until they're in their late 30s and early 40s.
Yeah.
For example, was a guy you interviewed, Vic, his name
Big Downs. Big
Vic
Downs.
Downs.
Yeah.
Vic Downs was competing in his 40s. He didn't even start competing till I mean, what he didn't start training when he was in his 30s.
Those 30s, yeah. Yeah.
Started training.
Right.
But he's a perfect example. I'm saying he peaked in his 40s.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's really unusual about bodybuilding.
Well, I think, today too, with all the, because TRT is a popular thing, and
Yeah, yeah.
and then of course bodybuilders are going to use steroids. But I think Reg Park, like you said, Jerry, was natural. He never used steroids.
Never use steroids, and people still argue about that.
Yeah.
They mentioned some of the so-called golden age guys like Steve Reeves, Reg Park, Clarence Ross, all these guys. They insist that they use steroids, and they base it on the fact that testosterone was discovered in 1935, basically.
Mhm.
And it was recommended for use as early as 1941. I mean, supposedly John Grymkowski, all these men.
Yeah.
You see, what they don't understand was that the steroid, yes, testosterone was around, but it wasn't really known in athletic or bodybuilding circles.
wasn't available either, right?
Yeah, they didn't use it. They
Yeah,
just did. But they see the development even back then of guys like Reg, Steve Reeves,
yeah,
and Clarence. I mean, these guys had great builds for their day.
yeah,
And some of these guys just don't have the genetics. They train, they diet, some of them even use drugs. They just don't get the results they want. They get jealous, they get bitter, and they make accusations against these guys without any evidence.
right,
And what
right.
really pisses me off, John, more than anything about this, is that these guys aren't around to defend themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
Steve Reeves, Dredge, Clarence, or John Grimm, they can't even defend. So when I see that, I defend them.
yeah,
I take it upon myself to point out how stupid it is to say. And there's a guy, I don't want to mention it, there's a guy who also has a podcast who interviewed me a couple of times. He's gone, he used to try and also agree with me that these guys were natural. But I saw a couple of his recent podcasts. I was very, very saddened to see he's gone in the other direction now. He's trying to show evidence that guys like Steve Reeves and John Grimm did use steroids, basing it on secondhand information that somebody says this. Like, as a natural competitor yourself, John, I'm sure you've been through this. I'm sure that there's people who might somewhere along the line have said, well, I happen to know John Hansen.
all the time. Yeah,
I know that he takes growth hormone and he
yeah,
takes tons of. My point is anybody could say anything they want, but it
right,
doesn't mean that it's true.
right, right.
It doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah, they call me a fake natty, so I looked it up. What does fake natty mean? It says you acquired your physique by using steroids, which wasn't true.
Right.
And then you're saying that you were natural when you weren't natural, and that's not true either. So I'm not a fake natty.
John, how old were you when you started training? What, 12?
13, 14.
I mean, they don't possibly consider that all those years of training might have had something to do
Right,
with
right.
nutrition.
They don't understand how hard I trained and how many years and all the eating, all the food I had to eat,
Event, but from your writings and from what I've seen in your video, you also happen to train sensibly. You
Yeah,
did stupid things.
yeah.
That's one of the reasons to account for yours. But they don't think about all that.
No,
And one thing I'll add also is that expression "natty" to me is like chalk across a plastic. I hate that expression.
I know. I hate it too.
I hate it. What's wrong with saying natural? Is it so
Right.
hard to say natural? Why do you have to say net? Oh, this
Right.
guy. Oh, I don't think he's natty. Really? Really? Look, you know what you do? Go on and look up in the dictionary the word natty, and you'll see it means something like nicely dressed. But it has
Yeah,
nothing to
yeah,
do with natural. You know
right.
what I mean? Say natural. It doesn't, it's one syllable.
Not harder.
Natural. It's not that hard to say. Seriously, I
Oh,
can
I
see
know.
when somebody says that expression, I immediately get a bad impression of them.
Right, right.
It's
They all
like
say it.
it's like some people say, well, when I see somebody and they have a bunch of teeth missing, I get a bad impression. Well, with me, there's two things in bodybuilding that'll give me a bad impression. One is when somebody uses the expression natty, and the other is when when they wear the baseball cap backwards. Don't ask me why, but for some reason, every guy I've spoken to who wears the hat backwards like that when they train has always been kind of on the dumb side. Intelligent person, when I talk to them, they
Yeah.
turn out to be kind of on the dumb side. I can't explain why. This is just something I've noticed.
Yeah. There's a definitely correlation.
Yeah. So when I see a guy in the gym with that baseball cap pulled backwards, I go, oh, another dummy.
Well, with Reg Park, I believe he was natural because if you look at pictures of him when he was in his 20s, he was one of the biggest guys in the world, right? He was massive.
Not only that, but Reg was a very, very strong guy.
Yeah.
Reg himself told me some of the things, the lifts he used to do.
Yeah.
He was one of the first bodybuilders to bench press 500 pounds.
Right.
He did it in a contest, every had an audience and everything.
Yeah.
This man was very strong. His grip, everything was strong about this guy.
Yeah.
Even an older man, I got to know Reg. when I'd shake his hand, his grip was like iron.
Right. Yeah.
The strength of this guy.
I met him years later when he was in his probably 60s, 70s, and he was
Yeah.
a massive man, you know, just big,
Yeah,
wide shoulders. Yeah.
big guy. And the other guy who reminds me of that was Jack LaLanne. When I shook hands with Jack LaLanne when he was 92 years old, I shook his hand and I said, Jack, I think you broke two of my fingers. He had like an iron grip.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting about that is the science studies show that grip strength is an indication of health. In other words, if you can keep the grip strength as you get older, it's a good indication that you're.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah. So.
But what I was saying about Reg was as he got older, like in these shows, when I read these contest reports, they said he had more of a Zane-like look because he was getting more aesthetic and slimmer because he was getting older, which is what happens. If you're natural and you get into your 40s, you're going to lose muscle. You're not going to be as big. So that's why I always believed Reg. And so that's even more impressive that he was going to these shows, being natural, 45 years old, competing against guys like Boyarko and Dennis Tinderino and placing, holding his own at least,
Yeah, that's extremely impressive.
Yeah.
Even competed against his student, whatever you want to call
Arnold.
it.
Yeah.
Competed against each other. And, there's a shot taken backstage. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where they're standing relaxed. It was Reg, Dave Draper, I think, was in the picture, and Arnold was on the other side. And Reg, standing relaxed, he stood, he was right there.
Yeah.
In other words, even though Arnold was so much younger than Reg, he didn't overshadow Reg.
Right.
It wasn't like Reg looked like this weary old guy next to him. He was pretty damn good.
Yeah, and Arnold was 20 years younger.
20 years into, that's right.
Yeah, right. And he beat Dave Draper that year too.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about some of the IFBB shows that year. Because by this time, of course, the IFBB was much bigger. So the Mr. America, the Mr. World, and the Mr. Olympia were all held on the same night in New York. So Lou Ferrigno, at only 21 years old, was the winner of the IFBB Mr. America that year. So that was his first big title,
Right.
21, that's amazing, and he was a monster. I seen pictures of him in that show. He was huge.
What year was this?
73.
73, right. Okay. Yeah.
So Bob Birdsong won the medium class, and Leon Brown won the short class, and of course Lou won the overall.
Right.
So by winning that, Lou was qualified then to go into the Mr. Universe.
He won.
And he won the Mr. Universe at 21.
Yeah, I remember that. What was that held again, in Europe somewhere?
That was in Switzerland.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came on spectacularly, Lou.
Yeah. And he was kind of smooth when he won the America, and I think the Universe was held a few weeks later, and he looked much better. He looked more ripped.
Yeah, it's true.
So when he went in that Universe, it was the three guys they sent from America was Lou, Ken Waller, and Mike Katz, all heavyweights, or all, tall class, heavyweight, whatever it was. So nobody was in the medium class, and nobody was in the short class. We just had three guys. America just sent three guys from the tall class, and Lou beat both of those guys, both accomplished veteran competitors.
Yeah.
And, Lou beat them both.
Right.
Lou won the tall class, and Albert Beckles won the medium class. He beat out Ahmet Anulu, who was a famous bodybuilder from Turkey. And Giuseppe Diana from the Netherlands was the short class winner.
I don't remember that guy.
Yeah, he was a frequent competitor in NABBA and also IFBB. Short guy, but really good physique. Yeah. So that was in I believe in Switzerland, and I think it was covered on Wide World of Sports that year. That was one of the contests that was covered on Wide World of Sports.
Yeah. I remember.
Go ahead, Jim.
I remember seeing the photos of Lou winning that show.
Yeah. And then the Mr. World that year was won by Ken Waller.
Right.
And that was a big lineup. So Ken won the tall class. He beat out Dennis Tinnerino, and he beat out Bill Grant.
Oh.
So that was a good lineup. And then Ed Corney won the medium class, and Johnny Maldonado won the short class.
Johnny Maldonado, remember him from the East Coast.
Yeah. Johnny Maldonado was the uncle of Moses Maldonado.
Oh, was he? I didn't
Did you know
realize.
that? Yeah.
Wow.
So Moses, who won the light heavyweight class at the '82 NPC Nationals, the one that Lee Haney won.
I remember him.
That was his uncle. Johnny Maldonado was his uncle.
I remember most Smelton. And I remember Johnny too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good genetics ran in the family. That was cool.
Yeah.
And Bill Grant won most muscular, so that's pretty good for Bill.
Yeah. Yep. He won the world. Was it an IFBB? Yeah, he won an IFBB world, didn't he, Bill Grant?
74, yeah, the next year. Yeah. And then Corny was the winner of the universe in 72. That was the one in Baghdad, of course. That was the one covered in pumping iron.
Yes,
So
that's right.
he came back the next year. He didn't want to do the Olympia yet, I guess, which he was eligible for, but he decided to do the Mr. World. But I remember he wasn't in his best shape.
Yeah.
I think he was coming off a knee surgery or something that year. So he was kind of smooth.
Yeah. Yeah. Ed had a tendency to get a little smooth at times. I remember when he won the California. That's when I first met him years ago. And I asked him, I said, how did you get in such great shape? I think he said he says, I eat a lot of fruit. I doubted because I was on low carb diets. I said,
right. Everybody was on low carb diets back then, right?
How can you eat a lot of fruit and get ripped?
Yeah.
But if you ate mostly fruit, you probably would get ripped because it has no fat. It just has carbohydrates and water.
Right.
No protein either, but that's another story,
Right. So let's talk about the Olympia that year, Jared. So that was one of the more famous Mr. Olympias because that was the one that was covered in the book Pumping Iron.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's no video of it really.
Yeah.
But Arnold was probably in one of his best ever shapes, I would say. And there was only 3 people in it. It was him, Franco, and Serge Nubret. And Arnold, of course, won. This was his 4th Mr. Olympia win. So he had won more Mr. Olympias than anybody because Sergio had the record before him. He won 3. So Arnold won 4 now. And Franco looked really good. He was in 2nd. And Serge Nubret looked good, but Serge only got 3rd place. So Franco beat Serge Nubret.
Right.
So any thoughts on that, Joe? Do you remember the pictures from that, I'm sure.
Only 3 guys in the show? That's it?
Yeah.
Well, that's like I say, Serge Nubret, standing relaxed, would beat both of those guys. But, unfortunately, when he raised his arms, he didn't have really good lat development, and his arms were kind of mediocre.
I think the legs too, right?
Legs were weak, yeah. And Franco was, with the thickness and muscularity he had, I could see him winning over Serge Nubret. I think
what's interesting is a year before in 72, the one in Essen, Serge did really good in that one because he took 3rd behind Arnold and Sergio, and he beat Frank Zane and he beat Franco.
Wow.
And I think from 72 to 73, he looked like he was more aesthetic looking in 73, like more ripped. His waist was smaller and stuff, He had a great physique. But I think it was the leg development of Arnold and Franco that beat him.
I think you're right. I agree.
And Arnold, I think that year looked. Remember those pictures, like in the prejudging? It looks like it's against the wall. It's not even on stage.
Right.
And the 3 of them together, man, Arnold looked amazing. God, he was so. And what's also interesting about this, Jared, is that Arnold had that knee surgery after the 72 Olympia.
Right.
He overcame that, and I think his legs look probably the best of his career here. This in 74, I think his legs look fantastic. So it's amazing that he had that surgery and he came back better than ever,
Yeah. If he had those legs in Sydney in 80, there wouldn't have been as much.
There wouldn't have been any controversy, right?
At all. None.
Right. Right. Yeah, so that was really a significant contest as far as history because it was held, it was covered in pumping iron. And I think that was, the book, of course, that launched, that really got bodybuilding popular with the general public.
Yeah.
And, and they had some amazing, George Butler took some amazing pictures not only at the contest, but they were also in California all year. And they were living in California and they took pictures of them training at the gym and stuff, so the pictures in that book were just unbelievable.
Yep, that's true.
Now, there was another show that night, right, in WBBG, and you went to that one, right?
Is that the one where Steve Reeves was at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I chose that show
Over this one, yeah.
because I wanted to see Steve Reeves in person.
Yeah.
And that was the Dan Lurie contest. I went to that one, and that was 73 you're talking about?
Yeah, 73.
Is that the year Bill Grant won the America, WBBG America? I'm not sure.
Maybe Boyer won the Mr. World.
Might have been
Oh, Dickerson won the America.
oh, okay. So then Bill probably won in 72.
Yeah.
But yeah, they brought Steve Reeves out on, and I was right under the stage, so I could see Steve. You know, Dan Lurie gave him a plaque or something like that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I remember thinking, remember this guy was one of my earliest bodybuilding idols. You know, and all those Herculean there, and here he is, right there, right, like
Yeah.
good-looking guy. Good-looking guy. But
Was it sold out, Jer?
it was what?
Was it sold out?
Yeah, it was pretty sold out. Yeah. And the audience went crazy when Steve came out, Steve Reeves. And but the thing I still remember about that show, because I was close enough to notice this, was how uncomfortable he looked. Steve Reeves looked very uncomfortable. He looked like he wanted to get out of there fast.
I wonder why.
Eyes were darting around. He just did not, wasn't smiling. He didn't look never even cracked a smile.
Wow.
Yeah, I found out later on, I met him a couple of more times, and I realized that Steve Reeves had a kind of a funny personality, meaning that he was, to those who knew him well, like George Eichmann, he was a very nice guy. Armin told me a lot of stories about Steve Reeves. Steve Reeves was kind of very introverted. He felt uncomfortable around people. He was very shy. And, it's a strange situation when you look at the guy. I mean, he had such a magnificent physique, a super good-looking guy.
Yeah.
But he just didn't have much of a sense of humor. That's just the way he was. He was.
Yeah.
But I remember being when he was on the stage there when Lurie gave him the plaque. He was he looked so uncomfortable, so uncomfortable. I mean, I cracked a joke to Steve Reeves years later. I was up at the Weider office, and somebody said, Steve Reeves is coming up. He's coming into the office. So I was there, and I see him right in front of Joe Weider's office. I'd been doing. I was actually visiting with Fred Hatfield. He had a magazine I was writing for at the time. So I went up to Steve Reeves. I don't know if I told you this. I went up to Steve Reeves and I said, "Hey, Steve, I didn't hear your chariot pull up."
Yeah, you did.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny, but Steve Reeves, John, I swear. Remember I told you how Jim Morris looked at me like he wanted to.
Yeah.
That's the way Steve Reeves did. He was with a woman. I don't know if it was his wife. I don't remember, but I remember he had these deep blue eyes. He's staring right at me, like didn't say a word, just staring at me with no expression on his face.
No sense of humor.
Nothing. And I felt so stupid. I just kind of slinked away and went back into sit to Fred. And I told Fred, I said, I just cracked a joke to Steve Reeves. He just looked at me. Fred laughed. He thought it was funny.
Well, I read a few articles about that WBBG contest, and it's interesting because people who weren't around back then don't realize, but Dan Lurie and Joe Weider had this bitter rivalry, right?
Oh, boy, yeah.
Because I guess Dan used to work with Joe, and they had a bad falling out. So then Dan started his own organization called the WBBG, World Bodybuilding Guild. Right. And then he started holding his Mr. America and his Mr. Universe, and Mr. World to rival the IFBB.
Started his own magazine, too.
Started his own magazine, Muscle Training Illustrated. Yeah. So to spite Weider, he gets Steve Reeves, and he holds his contest on the same night as the Mr. Olympia. Right. Only blocks away in New York.
Right. Yeah. I had to make the decision that night whether to go.
Yeah, a lot of people did. Right.
I wanted to see Steve. I figured this might be the only opportunity to get to see him in person. I didn't actually get to go up to him or anything. I just saw him on the stage. But
yeah,
to Dan's show mainly to see Steve Reeves. I remember Joe Weider. We were once talking, and he described Dan Lurie as the gum on my shoe. I still remember because of the weird, expression that he
yeah.
Wouldn't talk any further. He says, Oh, that guy, he's the gum on my shoe. I'd already known him. I had known about the falling out.
Yeah.
And Lurie, I mean, he grimaced when he hated Dan Lurie.
Yeah, yeah.
So hated Dan Lurie.
Bodybuilding was interesting back then because you had the AAU with Bob Hoffman, and they hated Joe Weider. And then you had Joe Weider running his stuff, and it was getting more popular, and his magazine was probably the best, I'm sure the best out there at the time.
Yeah.
And then you had Dan Lurie, and he hated Weider, so everybody was like fighting with each other, you know.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
But I heard that also he really promoted that Steve Reeves thing, and he had him on like the talk shows in New York, like all that week leading up to the show. And so that's why I asked you if it was sold out, because I know he really publicized it a lot.
I remember it being pretty crowded, so it must have been sold out.
Yeah.
I don't know about the IB. I never got to the IFBB show. I couldn't tell you if that was sold out. I know that that year, the guy who I was training with, I believe, got second in the medium class, I think. A guy named Pete Caputo.
Oh, okay. Let me check that.
Was he in the medium class that year?
Probably in the America, right?
America.
No, Franklin Green was second to Bob Birdsong, and Kent Keene was third.
Okay, then it must have been the year before. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because he wasn't in the Mr. World either.
Yeah, I remember Franklin Green too. Yeah.
And another interesting thing that happened at that Olympia, I don't know if you heard the story, I'm sure. So Arnold was, the prize money for the Mr. Olympia back then was $1,000, and it was only for the winner, right? So I guess that year, Tom Minichello from what gym did he? Was that Mid City?
City Gym, yeah.
Mid City Gym, yeah. He was promoting it, and he gave Arnold, for some reason, $750 instead of $1,000.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's because there was more cost involved, or they didn't get the crowd they were expecting, or whatever. But he must have at the last minute wrote a different check. So I remember when I heard the story, Wayne DeMilius told the story, because Wayne DeMilius was there in the audience, and he didn't know much about bodybuilding. He was just getting into it, and he went and watched it because he was from New York.
Yeah.
And so he said Arnold gets this check, and he's walking around the stage, shaking his head, and he grabs the microphone. He goes, "This is bullshit." He goes, "This is what I get for training for a whole year. So this is $250 less than last year," And he dropped the mic and walked off the stage.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Tom Minichello was a strange character. He later wrote what they call I forgot the expression. He wrote a novel, but the characters in it were real people in bodybuilding, but he changed their names.
Oh, wow. I'd love to read that book.
So I can't remember the name, but Tom and I had an interesting. I trained at Mid City in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
Going to school, I didn't have much money, and I think the membership was something like $70. I can't remember, $70. It wasn't that much, but I had no money. I was just a kid in junior high school or something like that.
$70, you said?
Yeah, something. Oh no, it might have been a little more than that. It was a little more than that, but I remember I paid him all the money
for a year.
Yeah, but I still owed him. He allowed me to pay in parts.
Okay.
But I owed him $70.
Okay.
So one day I go to train at the gym, and he stands in the doorway. He says, "You can't train." He says, "Until you pay the balance of your membership." So I looked over his shoulder, and I saw Chris Dickerson, and I knew Chris. I said, "Could I at least say hello to Chris?" He says, "No." He says, "You can't even step in the gym." He goes like that.
Wow.
So I shrugged, and I joined R&J Health Studio in Brooklyn. That's when I saw at Julie Levine's gym.
Julie Levine, yeah.
So every time I'd go to a contest, Minichello was like an IFBB, like you say, he was, involved with the IFBB.
Running it, yeah.
Be there, and he would not talk to me. He'd give me the cold shoulder every time, right?
Oh my God.
So one day, this is about 6 years later, I go to a contest, and there's Tom Minichello, and I figure, okay, he's not going to say hello. I walk by me, and I hear a voice say, "What's the matter, Jerry? You can't say hello?" And I looked, it's Tom. I said, "Tom, you haven't spoken to me in years." I said, "Because I owe you $70. He says, "Yeah, and by the way, when are you going to pay that?"
Oh my God, what a character.
Yeah. So what can I say?
Yeah, he would have been a great interview. He's passed on, right? He's not alive.
Later on, he retired and sold the gym, moved to Florida.
Okay.
And like I say, I wish I could tell you the name of that.
I
Ramon,
remember reading about that, but I never read the book.
I think the expression Ramon a clef or something like that, where you write a novel that's supposedly fiction, but you use real characters and change their name. I mean, everyone's in it. Joe Weider, Arnold, all. And
Did you read it?
No, I never read it. I never read it because I heard it was a real character assassination book. You know, he really wanted he was very mad at a lot of people, and he said a lot of bad things, and I just didn't want to read that stuff.
So he had a falling out with the IFBB, I guess, right?
Yeah. So that's one of the impetus to write that. He wanted to really go after but he
What
didn't
was,
want
what was the falling out about? Do you remember?
that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know he probably was afraid of getting sued or something, so he writes this novel where he had Arnold was in there, Joey, all these people from the IFBB, Ben Weider. He just changed their names, and what he wrote was probably true.
Yeah, I know.
Very negative from what a couple of people read it, told me very. I was going to read it, but when I heard that, I said, "No, I don't want to read that stuff.
Yeah,
I don't want to read this negative stuff." Nah.
Yeah, I wonder what happened because he was a bigwig with the IFBB from it because all those muscle builders I got from the 70s, you know, he was running all the shows.
Yeah, he just had a strange personality. In other words, he could turn against you at the drop of a dime. You know, like I was just a kid.
Yeah.
I was 14 years old. He got mad at me. You know, I mean, come on. You know, $70. You know, I mean, he
like,
talked for 6 years because
like when Frank Zane didn't talk to you for like 5 years, right?
Well, that Frank had a better reason because I threatened to fight. I wanted to fight him, and I
Oh, okay.
Frank was more or less justified in being
right.
He figured I was a raging lunatic, and it's best not to talk to him. So, Frank could be at least justified, not Tom.
Yeah, right. Well, I want to talk about one other show before I let you go for this interview, Jer, and that was the Mr. International contest, which was held every year in Tijuana, Mexico.
Eddie Sylvester, yeah.
Yeah, Eddie Sylvester, who was actually the first IFBB Mr. Universe winner in 1950.
Yeah. 1959, wasn't it 59?
Yeah, 59, yeah.
I remember him. I met him I met him, believe it or not, in Madrid, Spain, when they had the World Bodybuilding Championships there in '87.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I was there?
Yeah, I was there. I was covering it for Joe Weider. That was put on by Rafael Santoyo, I think runs now.
Yeah.
I was there and I met Eddie Sylvester and his wife. And I said to him, you know, I remember the conversation. I said, I never had a chance to attend one of your Mr. International shows, but I said, I always thought I liked the way you did it. Most of all, I love the trophies you gave out.
Trophies, yeah.
I said, I actually had one of them in my apartment, the one that's Frank Zane won when he won the international.
Right.
Up close, I said, and let me tell you, Mr. So he says, call me Eddie. I said, let me tell you something. That was a true work of art.
Yeah, that's what I heard of it.
He liked that. He says, yeah. He says, we put he says, you know what? He said, I didn't want to give the bodybuilders stinking little cup that they give, you know. Yeah. Because I was a bodybuilder myself. I know how it is to train and diet.
Yeah.
Says, I didn't want to give these guys like some stinky little cup or something. The least I could do is give them like a nice, like a real work of art that they'd be proud of.
Yeah. Was that trophy heavy too, Jer?
Yeah.
I heard it was super heavy. Yeah.
Very heavy. Barely move it. You know,
it was all marble and stuff, right?
They had a lot of marble, and it was just, you know, it was big too, and it was just very ornate. It was like a sculpture. I mean, it was something that even if you were not a bodybuilder, you wouldn't be embarrassed to put that in your living room.
Right.
It was a true work of art.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah. So that was a pretty popular show because a lot of the bodybuilders from California would go in it because it wasn't that far of a drive to Tijuana.
Right.
I heard back in the day, Bill Grant told me that the bodybuilders would always go to Mexico to get the drugs and come back with them, you know.
Oh, that went on for years.
Yeah.
You get it right over the counter.
Right.
Walk into any drugstore. Let me have some Diana Bowl.
They didn't have any problem going back over the border either.
They weren't enforcing it back then.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it was very easy to get. Very easy to get drugs back then.
Okay, so this Mr. International was really wild. This was one of they called it. So I just did a video on my podcast or on my YouTube channel. It's called. I read the article that Joe Weider wrote about this called "Let Me Tell You a Dirty Story."
Oh, wait, I think I know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Sergio, after losing the Olympia to Arnold in 72, he figures Weider is stacking the judging panel against me, and I'll never have a chance of beating him at the Olympia. So Sergio goes into this Mr. International contest. So the reason why, in the article, they said the reason why Sergio went into the Mr. International, because they said the Mr. International is kind of along the level of a Mr. America.
Right.
Sergio's already a three-time Mr. Olympia. Why is he going down to a Mr. America level? But I guess the reason why was Eddie was also holding another contest called the Mr. International Azteca.
Oh.
The only guys who were allowed to enter into that, you had to be a Mr. International overall winner.
Oh, okay. Almost like a Mr. Olympia thing.
Yeah. And so the previous Mr. International winners included like Boyer Coe, Franco won it 1 year, Arnold won it 1 year, and Frank Zane, like you said, won it 1 year. So there's some really big names that won this. I think Ken Waller won it 1 year. And so Sergio just went into this because he wanted to challenge Arnold, who was at the show. Arnold and Joe Weider were at the show, and Franco was at the show. They went to, I'm not sure if they were there to watch there or if they were there to guest pose. I'm not sure. But Sergio goes into the Mr. International just so he can have a title, and he's eligible to go into this Mr. International Azteca. And then when he wins that, he wants to challenge Arnold to come up on the stage with him. And he figures with Eddie Sylvester's judges, he's going to have a better chance of actually having a fair shot at beating Arnold. He's not going to have a shot at the Olympia, you know. So he told Eddie Sylvester, he said, I don't want the trophies. You know, he goes, you can give the trophies to the other guys. And he goes, I just want the title so I can go into this other one. So Bob Birdsong won the class that Sergio was in, and Bill Grant was second. And then Dave Dupree won the tall class, and Pierre van der Steen from Belgium, he won the short class.
Okay.
So after Sergio wins, he gets on stage and he challenges Arnold, which is wild. You know, again, these crazy contests in the 70s. He's like, come up on stage with me. And the crowd's going nuts. You know, yeah, we want to see this, you know. And Joe Weider's telling Arnold, no, sit in the crowd, you know, don't go up there, don't go up. So Arnold didn't go up there. Now, another story I heard from Randy Roach's book was that Joe Weider, when he got there, told Eddie Sylvester he had like 3 judges he wanted to put on the panel, his own judges. And Eddie Sylvester said, no, I've got my judges. So after that, you know, that's why he told Arnold, don't go up there, because the judging panel wasn't favored toward Arnold.
Interesting.
And then after this whole thing happened, they suspended Eddie from ever doing another IFBB show. He was kicked out of the IFBB.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess he held this Mr. International contest for the next couple of years, but it was like unsanctioned. He just did it on his own.
Sounds like an incident that I saw on TV 1 year. There was a show late night. I don't remember what it was called, but it had a guy named Tom something.
Tom Snyder, yeah.
Snyder had a show. And one night he had on Arnold and Sergio, both.
You saw that show? I always wanted to see that. Yeah, I never saw it. I heard about it.
Heard about it. So, you know, so they flexed, you know, he's interviewing him and this and that. And then they brought out an Olympic barbell. It had 245s on each side. So it was 225 pounds. And Tom Snyder says, okay, you guys have big muscles. Let's see how strong you are, you know? So Sergio, of course, was a former Olympic weightlifter. 225, even though he hadn't probably done Olympic lifting in years, was nothing to him. He does it. He picks it up, does a couple of presses with it.
Really? Wow, yeah, that's a lot of weight.
It looked like he had no weight on the bar. You know, it was really nothing. So then he challenged us. Oh, okay, Arnold, now you lift. He goes, and Arnold. I'll never forget what Arnold says. You know, and Snyder says, yeah. Snyder says, okay, Arnold, you ready to lift? And Arnold turns to Snyder. He says, I am a bodybuilder. I am not a weightlifter.
So they were on the show together.
Yeah, they were on together.
Wow. God, I'd love to see that tape.
Arnold said it with a straight face. You
yeah.
know, Sergio, I mean, he was it's jaw dropped. He didn't know how to handle it. He was actually stuck. He thought Arnold would actually try and lift a weight. Arnold's not going to lift a weight.
No, he knows. He's smart.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, between the two, I would guess that Sergio was stronger than him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, he was an Olympic lifter and this and that. You know, competitive Olympic lifter.
So did he do like a clean and jerk, or did he just press it straight overhead?
He first cleaned it to his chest, then he did a couple of presses.
Wow.
I don't remember. He might have done a couple of bent over rows too before he put the belt down.
What a powerhouse, huh?
Yeah. That I'm not sure about, but all I remember is Arnold saying that. You know, he wouldn't even touch the bar.
Yeah.
They did flex a little bit. You know, they were both in Street Club, but they did flex a little bit, but it wasn't like a, challenge between the two. Arnold flexed Sergio did it afterwards or something.
I think that was the same year in 73.
Yeah, but probably that's why I say it was probably around the same time.
Yeah. So I guess what ended up happening was Franco went into the show. So Franco was seated in the audience as well, and he was in shape. I mean, I think the Olympia was like 3 weeks later. Okay. So Franco went up there, and then they did like a draw, I guess, and I guess they gave them both. But I think Sergio got the trophy, so I think Sergio actually won.
Oh, so there was a draw between Sergio and Franco?
Yeah, that's what the magazine said, but Joe Weider said that that Sergio took home the trophy.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he won, and it looked like from the picture Sergio definitely was better than Franco.
Yeah, I would suggest that Sergio did win.
Yeah. And then in the amateur division, Pierre Vandenstein won because Sergio said, and in the magazine they said he was disqualified, but really the real story is he just wanted to get that title so he could go on the other contest,
Right.
And then I think they suspended Sergio after that, and they suspended Eddie Sylvester, and then the show that you saw, I think Sergio was there, right? Wasn't he guest posing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So that's crazy because here it is. He's in New York. The Mr. Olympia is right down a couple blocks away. And Sergio decides not to do that show. And instead he does this WBBG show. And he's like the guest poser there.
Yeah. I remember that.
And then they said, and then after the show was over, because this article was hilarious because Joe Weider wrote the article. And he was saying how Sergio was up to his dirty tricks and all. It was total. I'm like, I can't believe he wanted Sergio to go in the Olympia when he's talking about him like this. I mean, Sergio obviously would have had no chance. They were so biased against us. They were so biased towards Arnold and against Sergio. He would have had no chance at all. And so then they suspended Sergio after that. And then I think they said, oh, by the way, Sergio, you're suspended because you competed in the Mr. Galaxy contest last year or something in the WBBG show. Like they didn't know that, going into this show, It was just crazy the way things were done back then,
And no, they definitely were biased against Sergio. And also, remember, Joe wanted to showcase Arnold.
Yeah.
And Sergio was a definite threat to Arnold.
Yeah.
Anything they could do to keep Sergio kind of out of the picture, the way Joe looked at it, profited him and Arnold. So
yeah.
There was unquestionably, some people might say, well, it was because Sergio was black. I don't think it was that. I don't think it was a racial thing. I think it's just that Sergio himself was a definite threat to Arnold. He was the only guy who could probably really beat Arnold.
And Arnold was Joe's guy to promote.
Arnold was Joe's guy. He's on the cover of every damn magazine. He was Arnold's guy.
Yeah.
I remember Arnold telling me his story once. He said, when he first came over, Joe put him on a minimal salary, gave him leased him a Volkswagen Beetle or something.
Yeah.
When Arnold started winning a couple of contests, maybe 3-4 years later, he goes into Joe's office and he says, Joe, I need more money. This isn't enough money. And Joe says, he always does this thing about the budget. He did that with me and everybody. He says, Sergio, I'd like to give you money. Of course you deserve it, but we got the budget problem right now.
Yeah.
Come to me in a couple of months and I'll give you a raise. I'll give you more money. And so then Arnold telling me the story himself. He says, fine, Joe. He says, I go back to Austria now. And he goes to leave, and he says before he can get to the door, Joe practically leaped over his desk and grabbed him and said, "No, it's okay." He says, "I will give you a minute. We're going to give this raise right now." The way Arnold told the story was hilarious, though. I mean, I can remember he says, "That's okay. I go back to Austria." He knew that Joe would never go for that,
But Arnold was such a competitor, it seems like. I mean, I think he would welcome the chance to compete against Sergio in a fair contest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in a fair, yeah. But this was in Joe's mind,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think Arnold was afraid of Sergio at any time. I really.
'Cause I don't think Arnold was afraid of Bill Pearl, and Arnold did all those NABBA universes, and I know those were fairly judged. You know, they weren't biased toward Arnold. You know, and he won all those shows.
I don't think Arnold was intimidated by any of these guys, but Joe didn't want to take a chance because you know, like a guy like Sergio especially was good enough where, you know, he might actually, if he came in, like if Arnold was a little bit off,
Yeah,
came in like he did in Essen, you remember that
yeah,
year?
yeah,
Then there's a real danger that Arnold would lose, and it would tarnish Arnold's reputation. And Arnold was a big commercial property for Joe Weider. He made money.
yeah,
When it, you know, when it comes to, I always tell people, Joe Weider, when it comes to, I mean, he really genuinely loved bodybuilding. Don't get me wrong, but money was more important than anything to Joe.
Mm.
Anything that could make him money is that was the top priority for Joe, more than anything else.
Mm.
Bodybuilding was secondary. Yeah, if he could help bodybuilding, yes, of course he'd do it, because it also made him money, him and Ben. But money was of great. Joe would always try and wheedle people out of money and not give raises. I mean, one time, what happened was when the WBG started.
Yeah,
Joe. That's the only time Joe gave me a raise. I actually got a little bit more money for my articles, and he also gave me, because he was really threatened by Vince McMahon. You know, starting with, and he actually gave me a free ad. Me and my girlfriend had a health food store, and he gave me a free ad. And they, to show how generous he was, they used to send me bills each month.
yeah. You told me that.
I had an ad in Flex and one in Muscle and Fitness. Now the ad, it was like an invoice.
Yeah,
The ad, Muscle and Fitness, at the top, it would say quarter page, something like that. $30,000. And then the Flex one would say $18,000, and then the bottom where it said amount owed would be zero.
right.
They were trying to say, see how much we're giving you?
Yeah,
We're giving you over $40,000 worth of ads each month.
right.
Don't ask us for any more money. Don't ask us for any more money. You know?
Yeah.
I used to crack up when I'd see that.
That reminds me of I was the first winner of the Muscle Tech. Remember Muscle Tech? They had in like 1999, 1998. I think it was 99. It was the year after I won the Natural Olympia.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try to get a contract with them. And they told me, they said, well, we're putting all our money into this before and after competition, so we don't have time, you know, for that. So they said, if you can send us pictures of before and after, you know, with your physique, you know, you won this Natural Olympia, we'll make you the first winner. So they said the prize in the ad, it said the winners got $50,000, but I got $10,000. But they said it's $40,000 in advertising because we're going to run the ad. You know, it's worth $40,000 for the ad.
They did the same thing to you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It reminds me of the same thing.
Unbelievable. We can laugh about it now, but it's not really funny when you think about it.
Oh, I know. It's the bullshit marketing.
Yeah, they had the money to pay, they just didn't want to do it. That's what it was.
Yeah. So that's that Mr. International was pretty a wild show, and that's was like a wild time in bodybuilding. Do you think that Joe stacked the judges in '72 in Essen?
I don't know if it was Joe, but I know that Albert Busick was heavily involved in that contest, and it might have been him, because remember, Arnold was his buddy. It was his it's possible. I don't know that for a fact.
I saw the score sheet, and I didn't know a lot of those judges.
Yeah,
it wasn't even close. I mean, I think Sergio got only like 1 or 2 first place votes.
See, but when you tell me, now I didn't know that story that you just told me about Joe wanting to put 3 judges on the international judging panel.
Yeah,
that makes me think that maybe Joe did put some of those. It was involved in the judging at the Essen show.
Yeah.
It's very possible, because I remember I looked at the judges' names. I didn't know most of them myself either.
Right.
You know, but I know that what's his name? The guy I just mentioned, Albert Busick, had a lot to do with the organization of that show.
Yeah.
So he might.
Yeah, I think that was in Randy Roach's book. I think it was at the 1984 Universe, which was in Vegas, and I think Eddie told that story to either Rick Wayne or Wayne D'Amelia, and then they told it to Randy Roach
Right.
about Joe Weider wanted to use those judges for the Mr. International. Because when Arnold came over there and they found out Sergio was there, Joe said, I want to put 3 of my guys on the judging panel. And Eddie said, no, we already got the judges, and he goes, I'm not going to do that to my contest. Yeah. And that was the last show he ever, because I kind of believe it, because then they kicked Eddie out,
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
So you have to wonder how many contests over the years were influenced by Joe.
Yeah.
Having a say in choosing the judges. I think, as far as I know, that ended when Wayne DeMilia took over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wayne, if you know anything about Wayne was a kind of a, New York type of guy, no BS type.
Yeah.
In other words,
Yeah.
Joe came to him, when he was head of the pro division.
Right.
I'm talking about Wayne. If Joe came to him and said, listen, I want you to put blah, blah, blah on the judging, Wayne would say, Joe, you made me or Ben made me the head of the pro division. That's my job. That's the way Wayne would respond.
Right.
He had that level of integrity. He wouldn't go for that.
Yeah.
I know Wayne well enough. That would not happen with Wayne DeMilia.
Right.
So I think that my point is, it's possible that Joe influenced the judging before that, but once Wayne took over, that ended, just as Bob Hoffman, if you want to go back even earlier in the AAU contest, I know, and this has been written about, I think John Fair wrote in his book, how Bob Hoffman influenced the judging to choose a certain type of bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Meaning, put it explicitly, no black bodybuilders win the contest. And we want white, upstanding, guys. That's who we want.
Speak well.
And any judge who would say something like, "Well, wait a minute, we should only judge on body, man's skin color." He was out. He would not be a judge. Under Bob Hoffman's tenure.
Yeah.
Bob was a racist. No matter what anyone says, the man was a racist. He was anti-Semitic. Bob Hoffman would love the way things are going today if he was alive.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd be a very happy man to see the way things are going today. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Jared. Well, let's call it a day for this section. And so we covered 63, 73. So when we meet again, we'll talk about 1983, which was a big year. NPC Nationals with Bob Paris, and of course Samir winning the Olympia that year, and Jeff King winning the Mr. America that year.
Right.
And we'll also talk about 1993, which was also an interesting year. That was when I think Dorian won his second Olympia.
Yeah, that's when I was already covering the contest for Joe, so I was at those contests.
Yeah.
Especially the 93 one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when bodybuilding started to get huge. That's when Dorian came in like 257 or something, right?
Yeah. In fact, what was it, 90? Was it 91 when he won the first Olympia, Dorian, I think?
92.
92.
I was thinking, yeah.
Okay, no, but this was 91, because it was before he won the Olympia. I interviewed him, and I remember him saying to me, Dorian, I said, what's your goal, Dorian? What do you want to do? He says, I'm going to be the Mr. Olympia of the 90s. He says, I'm going to win it throughout the 90s, and then I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
He told me this in 91.
Yeah.
So
he knew.
I mean, there's a guy who made his dream come true.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Got to give the guy credit,
Yeah, right. All right, Jared. Well, thanks again for joining me on the show. Applied Metabolics is your newsletter.
Yeah. So, anyone, they want information on nutrition, exercise, and I do tell a lot of stories about my days at the original Gold's Gym. I fit it in there to make it interesting with Arnold, all those guys.
Oh, great.
It's very authoritative. It's no ads. I guarantee anybody who subscribes, it's at www.appliedmetabolics.com. They have learned a tremendous amount of information on nutrition, exercise, and I mean, they'll avoid all the mistakes I made in my over 60 years.
Right.
Hear people right.
And we love hearing the stories too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, Jared. Well, thanks again for joining us. I appreciate it every time you do this. I know it's a big time, a big commitment on your time, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, listen, hey, I love talking about this, and I always say this to you, John, and I'll say it again. Thank God there's a guy like you who's keeping bodybuilding memories alive, who are basically opening up the books so that these young people can appreciate all the accomplishments and the success of these past bodybuilders who, the only way you can find them is to do a search for them on Google.
Yeah, because the magazines are gone
Talks
now.
about them. So thank God, you interview these. I mean, I love it when you interview, you bring back guys like Boyer Co, when you do with Chris, all these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is terrific. It's thank God that you do. So keep up the good work is what I say.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate
Try
it.
and get better guests than me. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we can't get a better guest than you.
Okay, John. I'll see you later. Take care.
All right. Take care, Jerry. Thanks, buddy.